Welcome to episode 185 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from the Vault Studio on the beautiful campus of Grace College and Theological Seminary by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who just got back from a fancy lunch, John Scott Sloat.
I like cerulean.
Yeah. That's more your vibe than mine.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. But you've been there. You have you have a go-to bento box.
Yeah,
lunch, right?
I got a bento box that's a go-to.
Hey, you know who contacted me? And we're getting lunch in a couple of weeks.
Who's that?
Ben in Warsaw, from England.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You mean our new basement dweller?
Yeah, your new basement dweller.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Good. Yeah, he's great. We've loved having him in the house.
So I think we're getting Indian food.
Okay. Yeah.
The UK's national dish.
Yes, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's be honest. British food is not especially noteworthy.
No, outside of fish and chips.
Yeah.
But he texts me the sentence today that fish and chips have been relegated. Relegated.
Using soccer terminology.
The word relegated is great.
Yeah. Relegated to second place.
Relegated to second place behind Indian food.
Yes. Yeah, I believe that. There does seem to be a large population of Indians, as in those from India, not Native Americans, in the UK.
Yeah.
Seems to be a very large population.
Oh, yeah.
Which I suppose makes sense since, India at one point was a British
colony. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, in any case, if you would like to get in touch with the show, you can reach us on Twitter at VNSPod. You can email the show, variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, and you can, if you like, which we'd appreciate, leave a 5-star rating and a review. And we did have one of our faithful listeners reach out to us on social media this week.
Really?
Yeah, he tagged you in the tweet.
Oh, Danny in Ohio?
Danny in Ohio.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't remember exactly what he said, but I do remember that it happened.
He tweeted a screenshot of the announcement that the Jets, 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 are going to be on Hard Knocks this year. So why don't you explain for the listeners who may not be familiar with what Hard Knocks is?
Yeah, Hard Knocks is I believe, HBO show where they do episodes kind of on the fly in training camp. So while training camp's going on with, is this guy going to make the team? Mm-hmm. Is this star disgruntled? Who's holding out? Who's doing X, Y, Z? Yeah. And so and it's usually well done, the episodes I have watched. Mm-hmm. But I might be getting Max or HBO Max so I can tune in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a docu-series basically.
But it's like live. So like they'll make
within like a week, make it like a week delay kind of thing.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the reason he's tweeting that at you is that it's not quite like the Madden cover curse, but like oftentimes teams featured on Hard Knocks don't have the most successful seasons.
The last time the Jets were featured on Hard Knocks, they went to the AFC Championship game.
Okay, so that's how you're going to spin it. Okay.
That's how I'm going to spin it. Now, the Jets were very vocal. We do not want to be on Hard Knocks. In fact, I just saw an article. Aaron Rodgers does not want to be on Hard Knocks.
Yeah, I am not surprised by that at all.
So, should be interesting if they force him to sit down for an interview and what he says.
Yeah. Do you think it's going to work with him in New York?
I think 2 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think they gave him. He has way more weapons there, I think, than he ever did in Green Bay.
That's probably true. I mean, they got Garrett Wilson.
They've got better depth receivers, I think, than the Packers did in the last 5 to 7 years.
Probably.
I know they have some good catching pass catching running backs. There,
There
we go.
you go.
Whew. It's playing injured today. Not injured.
All the bloods rush to your stomach to
Yeah.
digest the food.
Yeah. Playing hurt.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't mention that we're recording on a Thursday, which is also very strange
Yep.
because you're going to be gone next week.
Yep.
So we can't record on our normal Monday. So we're recording on a Thursday for an episode that won't drop for another 5 days or whatever here.
That's right.
So let's talk sports, that there's not much to talk about since we are kind of in the doldrums of sports. And, by the time this episode drops, it's 5 days old news. But Northwestern did fire Pat Fitzgerald.
I did see that come across.
But now he's pursuing legal action.
Fun.
Yeah, it's a big old mess. What's ironic is that they fire him because, of course, the rationale is, well, the head coach should be aware of everything going on in the program. But they're keeping all of the assistants.
Who should be actually more in?
At least in pockets,
the day-to-day.
Yeah. So bizarre.
Yep.
It's a big old mess. Big old mess. But, and since, by the time this episode drops, the second half of the baseball season will be underway.
Yep.
How optimistic are you?
Not optimistic.
No, you're not optimistic.
No.
So put a percentage on it. Chances that the Mets get a wild card spot. 30%?
No, I was going to say 25.
Okay.
25%. I think they would have to get real hot, and I think some teams would have to start losing. I don't think we can win the division. I think the Braves are just too good. It kills me to say that.
Yeah.
But anybody who's watched the Braves this year will agree that they are just so much better than everybody else.
Yeah. But of course, the thing about baseball is
You just got to get hot at the right time.
exactly.
Yeah. Or go cold.
Exactly. So you have this massively long season, 162 games. But, if the Braves kind of, fade towards the end, they're going to win the division. But they get cold at the wrong time, or their bats get cold, or they get a key injury. Doesn't matter. In a playoff series in baseball, or they run into another team that just is absolutely red hot at any given moment.
Yep.
Yeah. I think in some ways baseball more than any other professional sport is like that, where the best team doesn't necessarily win series or even the championship.
So if we can get to 90 games, I think we've got a good chance of getting a wild card, but I don't know if we can get to 90 games.
Okay.
They'd have to really be humming along the rest of the season.
Okay. Have you I'm sure the answer is no, but I'll ask it. Have you caught any of the Summer League basketball?
No, I have not.
Yeah, I knew the answer was no to that. But I did catch a little bit of your Knicks last night in the Summer League.
Oh, yeah? Anybody look interesting?
Summer League, it's filler content. And, you're watching guys that the vast majority of which will never really see the floor in the NBA. They're going to be in the G League, or, they might be deep at the bottom of the bench. Minus some of the rookies that you're like, okay, they'll get some minutes. All the hype is over Victor Wembanyama, the first overall pick.
Is that how that name is pronounced?
Yes.
Wembanyama.
He's like 7'5".
Wow.
But has guard skills. But he's thin. As you'd expect at 7'5" when someone with guard skills.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting. It's the quality of the basketball is not always the best, as you might imagine. Because you got guys trying to, make the case for making teams and getting roster spots and all that kind of stuff. But
I imagine they're playing hard.
yeah, oh yeah, it's competitive for sure. But quality of basketball is not always the best. Anyway, you ready to move on, John?
Sure.
Today, we are talking about an article on the Gospel Coalition website. And that article is entitled, "Marriage is better for your adult kids than you may think." Which, I mean, in one sense, the article assumes that I have a certain posture towards that, right? But in any case, this article caught my attention. And I was also further encouraged by my lovely bride, who said, "I really like it when you guys discuss articles." And so we aim to please.
Even like this last week's article, or articles in particular that she enjoyed? Like Gospel Coalition articles?
I mean, any article, really.
Okay.
So
some of our most cantankerous ones have been when we've gotten an article from like the Atlantic or something like that. And
less so articles from the Gospel Coalition.
Yeah.
But we've done some New York Times stuff. We've done some Atlantic.
Yeah. What helps is they have a number of free articles that you can download and read, those websites, without a subscription.
Yeah.
We never do a Wall Street Journal because you can't get them without a subscription.
Yeah. Though I sent you a Washington Post article.
WAPO.
Yeah.
Yeah, WAPO.
You get a certain
some
number of freebies.
Yep, we can do WAPO.
Which we haven't discussed this. Maybe that'll end up being next episode or soon, perhaps. We'll see. But in any case, this article
Getting back on track.
trying. Let's see. I want to try to grab the thesis statement. I'll try to very briefly explain what the article is about.
Okay.
And then I'll ask for your general impressions, and we can go from there. So basically, this article, again entitled "Marriage is Better for Your Adult Kids Than You May Think," is responding to primarily responding to some research done by the Pew Research Group that says only 20% of parents say it's very important to them that their kids have children as adults.
Mm-hmm.
Another 34% say it's somewhat important. And a whopping, this is quoting directly here, a whopping, their word, not mine, 46% say it's not at all important. So read it again. 46% of parents say it's not at all important that their kids one day have kids. And then basically he's contrasting that with the next stat he gives. Compare this to the 98% of parents who say it's very important or somewhat important that their kids grow up to be financially independent and have careers they enjoy. So that's the sort of, not tension perhaps, but just the contrast that he's drawing and going to give some analysis as to why he thinks those numbers are what they are and what that reveals about our culture and even within the church.
Mm-hmm. And he would say those are correlated numbers, right? That
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's talk big picture. As you read the article, what were some of the things that caught your attention, or just big picture impressions?
Yeah, direction. So my big comment is directionally, I think this is right.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think marriage, broadly speaking, is good. Children, babies,
That's a hot take.
Are good, right?
Another hot take.
I know.
You're
I know.
Rolling.
However, where on some of the finances are, the boogeyman here.
Mm-hmm.
There's part of me that's like, even reading the article, how did financial and career success replace family life at the top of the parents' wish list? And I just kind of want to go, well, do you remember 2008 and 2009 when there was a big financial crash? Lots of millennials, lots of people lost their early career jobs in that moment and have been trying to rebuild ever since. And I think there's some real fear from that. And that was on the back of a .com bubble burst in the early 2000s, and
Housing burst there with 2008 as well.
Yeah. Yes. And so there's part of me that's like, yes, I agree. This is probably way too important. However, like I think I'm a little bit more understanding of some of the fears that come along with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is the nuancing of, what do we mean by financially independent and have careers they enjoy? Mm-hmm. That's a big category.
Yeah.
Because someone could hear that statement and go, well, I want my adult kids to be able to pay their bills.
Absolutely.
That seems like a sort of, baseline hope, right? Like,
oh yeah,
that parents are not having to perpetually and forever help out their adult children.
Absolutely.
Not that they shouldn't do it and that there aren't circumstances that necessitate it, of course. Mm-hmm. But I think there's a difference between that, though, and what someone might say is a sort of career they enjoy or have a successful career. And what does that mean?
Oh, yeah.
Because part of that, too, gets to the myth, and I think this is especially true for women, you can have it all. Mm-hmm. You can be the fully attentive, fully engaged, invested parent, in particular tends to be moms, and yet still have a highly successful, highly demanding career. And that's just not true.
In like 2011, 2012, there was a the article faced derision at the time as it would today, but a Hillary Clinton staffer who quit to raise her family basically published an op-ed piece said that women can't have it all, and that was the name of the headline. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
And basically it was like, listen, my family needed me, and so I quit to go take care of them. Mm-hmm. I cannot have it all. Yeah. I got to make choices.
Yeah.
And she was met with, I think, some pretty brutal attacks after publishing that.
Yeah, and I think another dynamic that has to be recognized is what are realistic expectations for standard of living? Mm-hmm. That I think some young adults have unrealistic or such elevated expectations of what kind of standard of living they should be able to have very soon in their career or post-college that they wrongly conclude, well, we both just have to work. Mm-hmm. There's just no way that one of us cannot work. And if you push a little deeper, and sometimes that's true. So that may be true in some situations where you're like, yeah, between the two of you, you probably both need to work to help have a basic sort of modest existence.
Yeah.
Those situations do happen. But I'm talking about the sort of, well, if we're not pulling in, if one spouse is not pulling in $100,000, then the other one's got to work. I mean, we have to be making six figures to have any reasonable standard of living. Mm-hmm. That's ridiculous. Unless maybe you're living in downtown Manhattan.
Yeah.
And even then, I'm like, probably not. So I do think there are some of these factors where people have misguided expectations, which do play into one of the critiques in the article of we've redefined what the good life is. Mm-hmm. That our culture has been successful in defining the good life in very financial terms and being able to have a certain standard of living that if you don't have, then you can't possibly have the good life. So I think some of those dynamics are at play, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. One other small thing that I think I would push back on in the article a little bit is it seems, and this is me trying to read between the lines, it does seem like he is writing to a very particular situation that he does mention in there with this gosh, what was it, a 22-year-old marrying a 20-year-old, and the parents were like, whoa, pump the brakes. You guys are only in your early 20s. And they got married, and everything turned out great. The only pushback I would give to that is generally I think it's a good idea for people to get their if they're going to go to college, get their bachelor's degree first to finish that degree before getting married. I think there's some, I think it's called success sequence that's out there where get all your education before you get married, get married before you have kids, those sorts of things. And they're like, people who do that, 95% of them have a success that's determined by the study.
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, I think that in one sense, every situation needs to be evaluated on its own merits.
I agree with that.
So I want to put that qualifier out there before I make a generalized statement that's about to follow. I think probably as a general rule, I would lean towards, it's probably not a bad idea to finish your bachelor's degree before getting married. Probably not a bad idea. But I also think from a Christian perspective, I think there is a real danger that some well-meaning Christian parents don't fully appreciate or take into account in terms of if you have a mature young couple they're clearly compatible, they're both godly, they're both mature. If you unnecessarily or unwisely delay the marriage, you are creating circumstances that invite increasing levels of temptation. So that's something that I think needs to be also taken into account in those contexts. Okay. Another number that comes out of this, where was it here? I lost it. Here it is. I mean, and really I would say this is still pretty shocking to me though, right? Only 53% of parents say it's very or somewhat important that their children get married as adults.
That seems surprising to me.
That is surprising to me. I would expect that to be much higher.
Yeah. It makes me question the statistic, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And again, let's make all the qualifications. God calls some people to be single. That's true. And we're not in any way advocating like, go ahead, rush into marriage just for the sake of getting married.
Yeah.
Obviously not. But I think in one sense, perhaps the most compelling point made in the article is he cites some data from the American Family Survey. And he introduces it with, the idea that marriage and children are obstacles to personal happiness fits nicely with our modern intuition. But what if the data reveals the opposite is true? The 2022 American Family Survey shows 33% of married mothers aged 18 to 55 report they're completely satisfied with their lives, while only 15% of childless women in the same age range make the same claim. And then he goes on to quote the Harvard Study of Adult Development, the longest scientific study on happiness ever conducted. Their findings show, quote, the good life is found in relationships, including marriage and family. Other studies show marriage is of far greater importance to personal happiness than a career.
Are you familiar with that study, the
No.
Harvard longitudinal study?
No.
Oh, yeah. It's fascinating. They took a class from Harvard. It was like 25 or 30 men from this class and did surveys with them every year until I think the whole cohort has passed away now.
Wow.
So it's a really, really fascinating study.
Yeah. Yep. Now, I want to get to the end of that article because I think he has some interesting points about codependency that I want to hit on. But I will say there's a danger here, and I want to believe the best about the author here. I mean, this is on the Gospel Coalition, after all. This is not in some random newspaper or The Atlantic or the New York Times or the Washington Post or something like that. There can be a danger sometimes with articles like this that make marriage and family to be the end-all and be-all of life.
Yeah.
And as Christians, we know that's not true. Biblically speaking, that's not true. So we have to be able to say marriage and family are very good things, great gifts of God, but they're not the ultimate thing. And the church can get in one sense in an equal amount of trouble by so focusing on marriage and family that it in essence becomes an idol. And it takes the place of one's relationship with God. Again, there are the two extremes. You can either denigrate and dismiss and ignore the family, which is not biblical, or you can so elevate it that a good thing becomes an idol because you're trying to make it an ultimate thing. And that's just something I think that needs to be kept in mind in these conversations, that we, even as we talk about the biblical value of marriage and family and the goodness of it, that we don't talk about it in ways that make it sound like it's an ultimate thing.
And he does have about 2 sentences on that toward the end of the article. But I do wish that was a bigger focus of his. I did find myself thinking about that throughout the reading of the article.
Well, I want to get your thoughts on one last section of this article. The section is entitled Unhealthy Codependency. And this was an interesting observation. I want to get your thoughts because both of us work with college students.
Me historically.
Yeah.
Less so now.
Yes. I mean, what was your lunch meeting about, though?
It's about college students, yeah.
Yeah. So even in your new role, even though it's not a focus of what you're doing, you're still involved with college students. In any case, he wonders whether, quote, an unhealthy codependency is another factor behind why increasing numbers of parents don't value their children starting their own families when they become adults. And he goes on to talk about, basically, in one sense, it's sort of the phenomenon of the helicopter parent, in terms of parents are so much more involved in the details of their young adult children than has been historically the case. And that on the flip side of that, adult children are therefore more dependent on their parents and less independent because they just kind of roll with mom and dad doing everything for them and not giving them and them not, experiencing a greater level of independence. And he makes an interesting point. He says codependency may be one of the reasons today's 16-year-olds aren't in a hurry to obtain their driver's licenses, and 22-year-olds aren't rushing to get married and start families of their own. Have you come across this phenomena of 16-year-olds not that interested in getting their driver's license?
Yeah, we've had I would say it's probably more the exception than the rule.
Sure.
I think, but I've known we've had graduate students at Grace who haven't had a driver's license.
Graduate students?
Yeah, people that have graduated college that didn't have a driver's license.
How is that possible? Like especially in a rural context like we are.
Yeah.
It's one thing if you're in New York City or downtown Chicago,
Sure. And
public transit, you get around. Like,
to be fair, the student grew up in Chicago.
Okay.
And I think had a significant other that drove them places. I think. But I remember we were all like lining up to get to fill out the forms so that we could drive for Grace, and the student goes, "Yeah, I don't have a license." Really?
Yeah. Yeah. But I am aware of high school kids, 16, 17, who are in no rush to get their driver's license. When I was like 14, I was thinking, I cannot wait to get my driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I got it like literally the absolute soonest I could have possibly gotten it.
Yeah, I think I went on my
point.
birthday to take the test.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was such a rite of passage, and it was such a opportunity for freedom.
Oh yeah.
Obviously within reason, but it's like, you mean I don't have to get a ride from my parents to go hang out at my friend's house, or I don't have to wait for them to come pick me up, or after school, I can just go home in my own car and not have to wait for mom or dad to pick me up. That's amazing.
That was great.
It's living the dream, man.
Still is great.
It still is. And yet there's a portion of the high school population now that is just like, not that interested. Eventually, probably, but I don't get that.
I don't get it either.
And I don't know if it's the codependency or what it is, but it's the like, I just cannot, I can't fathom it. It boggles my mind.
Yeah.
So, anyway, and it's an interesting section on codependency because he basically puts the blame on both parents and sort of young adult children. But, yeah, I mean, in our experience working with college students, we see it, the sort of overly hovering helicopter parenting kind of, and some kids chafe against it and kind of chuckle about it. Come on, mom. Or they'll make cracks about, mom or dad being, usually it's the mom. Not always, but usually being a little bit too hovering and make cracks about it. And others seem to literally depend upon it. Like, I don't know how I'm going to function without my mom or dad right here.
Oh yeah, the number of dorm rooms that were cleaned by moms at the end of the semester every year. Wild.
Yeah.
I will say dads can be a bit more hovering when it comes to sports generally.
Sure.
And so if their son or daughter is really good at this sport, they're invested to the hilt.
Yeah, is that hovering though, or is that just trying to live vicariously through them?
I think sometimes mom's involvement in their kids can be living vicariously through them.
Yeah, it depends. It depends. I suppose it depends on what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for dads, it tends to be more tempting, especially in the sports thing, of I'm going to live vicariously through my son or daughter's athletic success because that, reflects well on me. That I can brag to the guys, hey, my daughter is a college athlete, or she did this, or, she scored the winning goal in this really important game, or my son, holds this record or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. I understand that temptation. But that's different than, I think, some of the other aspects of helicopter parenting where it's like the kid just is incapable of, cleaning their own room.
Or doing their homework without their parents checking it.
I don't think that's not helicopter. That's not living vicariously. That's paralyzing your kids. So anyway, he closes with a challenge to the church, calling us to push back against some of the cultural intuitions about what the good life is, and that's good. he does, and he does talk about, Genesis 1:28, and this is an important line. Maybe this is what you're getting at earlier in reference to the sort of quote-unquote creation mandate. Fruitfulness through marriage and family, though certainly not the only way to be fruitful, is a key part of God's creation mandate and his good design for human flourishing. So there's his little qualification, which I appreciate. Like, hey, there are other elements of fruitfulness that don't involve procreating.
Yeah.
And that have a much more directly spiritual dynamic of taking another person under your wing and discipling them, or sharing the gospel with others and, being involved in their lives. That doesn't require.
Much more Matthew 28.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so we'll put the link to the article. We'll see what you think of that in the show notes. But you ready to move on?
Sure.
Time now for This Day in Sports History.
This Day in Sports History, July 18th. 2023, 1976, Nadia Comaneci. Comaneci. I don't know how you got there. Becomes the first gymnast in Olympic Games history to score a perfect 10, doing so 7 times at the Montreal Games.
Yeah, 14 years old.
Wow.
It's kind of crazy that some sports like gymnastics,
you peak early.
And then even like women's tennis, though the Williams sisters are kind of an outlier on that. But it's not uncommon for like a 16-year-old women's tennis player to crack the top 5 and be like one of the 5 best players in the world. That doesn't happen in a lot of other sports.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of another sport it would happen.
Well, we mentioned gymnastics. Women's tennis.
Soccer sometimes.
Not that young, though.
Yeah, I remember Christian, the American that was just traded from Chelsea to AC Milan.
Don't know.
Okay. Pulsak? Something like that.
Pulisic? Is that how you say his name?
I don't know. But anyway, I remember reading about him when he was 16 and that he was going to be.
Right, but he wasn't playing at the absolute highest. Like, he wasn't going into the Premier League and, like, in competition for, I don't know what their equivalent is of, like, the MVP of the league. But
he would have been probably on, like, their G League team, basically.
Right.
Anyway, 1988, British Open men's golf, Royal Lytham and St. Anne's, Spaniard Seve Ballesteros. Wins his 3rd Open title by 2 shots from Nick Price of Zimbabwe. You had to know that was coming.
Oh, absolutely.
My church history class this last Sunday, the first thing I said was, I pronounce names incorrectly. Do not bother correcting me. I'm not going to change.
I mean, it should be well known by now that I go out of my way to try to find names.
1994, Houston Astros tie NL comeback record, trailing 10-0 and beat the Cards 15-12.
Yeah, that's like a mercy rule score practically right there.
That's in the ballpark for sure. 99, British Open men's golf. How do you say that? Carnoustie. Scotsman Paul Lowry wins his only major title by 3 strokes in a 4-hole aggregate playoff with Jean Van de Velde.
Van de
Velde and Justin Leonard. Recovers from 10 shots behind after 3 rounds from the biggest comeback in major championship history. That guy famously triple bogeys the last hole.
Yes. Have you heard of this before?
I believe I have. I'm
sure it's on YouTube, but
very familiar.
It's classic. I mean, it's this Frenchman who, he hits it into the water and then hits it again, like into a like it's like it looks like up to this point he looks like a professional golfer who's going to win a major tournament. And then the last hole, it's like you or me are out there on one of these courses where it's like we look completely lost and like we don't belong. So I'm sure you could like YouTube it and watch him absolutely butcher the last hole. So, all right. So, who do you like?
Probably Nadia.
Yeah, Comaneci.
Yeah, Comaneci. Yeah.
Okay. I think I did well to get like 3 names in there.
Yes,
That were a challenge.
Your skills are improving.
Yeah,
yes.
I'm trying. So, all right.
14 years old.
Nadia Comaneci it is. One thing you liked.
I've definitely mentioned this on the pod before, but I think it's been at least a year since it's been my one thing. So I'm going to mention it again. I've been listening through the history of Rome. Really, really good.
Yeah, I never finished it. I got all the way through basically the end of the 1st century AD.
I'm like on the cusp of Diocletian right now.
Okay.
I was painting baseboards in my house last week, and
yes.
I bust from a little bit, probably Pompey the Great, all the way to where I'm at now, close to Diocletian, so 2nd century.
Yeah, I mean, my main interests lie basically in 1st century BC and 1st century AD, because that's the most relevant for New Testament background.
Yeah,
but he does a great job with it.
He's really good. I really enjoy him. Have you listened to his Revolutions podcast?
No.
Okay, so he does Revolutions as well that are pretty interesting.
Like one episode per
no,
French Revolution, or
he'll do
like
a season.
series.
He'll do so his first season's on like the Glorious Revolution, the British Revolution.
Okay.
The 2nd season's on the American Revolution. 3rd season's on the French, and right now he's in the middle of the Russian Revolution, and he's been in the Russian Revolution like a year and a half.
Wow.
Just because there's a lot in the Russian Revolution.
Now, see, that would fascinate me because I have
You love the Russians.
I have a fascination with Russia.
Unfortunately, unless something drastically changes here in the next decade, I don't think you're getting to Russia.
Well, not anytime soon. Not anytime soon, which makes it all the more
disappointing,
bitter that we tried and couldn't get it done back in 2019. Who knew that the world was going to be so wild? Yes. And I think someone in the global office actually recommended, you could go to Ukraine instead. It's basically kind of like it's very similar to Russia. We put a nix on that, but which is probably good. I don't know. Anyway, wow, dodged a bullet there.
Yes, we did.
All right, my one thing I liked is I am finishing up a book by Matthew Amati in the New Studies in Biblical Theology series. It's entitled The Royal Priest, Psalm 110 in Biblical Theology.
Is he related to Samuel Amati?
Brother, I believe.
Okay. I know Samuel. I've met Samuel.
Yeah?
Yep. Had a doctoral seminar with him at Southern.
Okay. This is Matthew Amati's revised dissertation. Published in
Great.
This. Yeah.
Wonderful.
It's very good. Very good. I'm enjoying it immensely. So, all right. We have talked. Let's see. What have we talked? We talked Pat Fitzgerald getting fired. We have talked marriage is better for your adult kids than you may think. We have talked Nadia Comaneci.
Comaneci. How many times did you have to hear that before we went on air? Did you know that's how it's pronounced?
I knew that. Yeah.
Really?
I mean, I'm old enough. Not that I obviously remember the 76 Olympics. I was 3. But I remember Mary Lou Retton in 1984 and them kind of comparing her to Nadia Comaneci.
Okay.
So that's probably where I'm familiar with it. And we have talked the History of Rome podcast. We've talked the Royal Priest, Psalm 110 in Biblical Theology. And so I think by definition, we have covered our various and sundry topics. And all that's left to say is, until next time, the Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.